Darth Vader. Now let's start with Darth Vader, arguably the most infamous Sith apprentice ever. Before he was Vader, he was Anakin Skywalker, this super talented Jedi Knight who everyone kinda thought was the chosen one. But his story takes a dark turn real quick. Anakin was powerful, brave, but also pretty impulsive and emotional. He had this intense fear of losing the people he loved, especially Padme. That fear made him vulnerable, and Emperor Palpatine saw that as a golden opportunity. Sidious manipulated Anakin, promising him the power to save Padme from dying, which was something the Jedi couldn't do. So Anakin switched teams, went full dark side, and became Darth Vader. And from then on, Vader was intimidating, ruthless Sith apprentice with his black armor, heavy breathing, and insane force powers. He was the Emperor's right hand, hunting down Jedi survivors and crushing the rebellion. What's crazy is how complex Vader is. Deep down, there's still some good buried in him, but the dark side totally dominates. Darth Maul. Next we have Darth Maul, one of the coolest Sith apprentices you'll ever see. Maul was super intimidating and practically wordless, but his presence alone was enough to send chills down your spine. What's wild about Maul is that he was trained by Darth Sidious from a super young age. Sidious basically raised him just to be this perfect killing machine who could take out Jedi and do whatever the Emperor needed. Maul was all about speed, precision, and raw aggression. Even though Maul technically died by falling down a shaft, he wasn't done. Thanks to some crazy Sith alchemy and sheer willpower, Maul survived, just barely, with half his body replaced by cybernetics. He became this rogue Sith who wasn't fully loyal to Sidious anymore, but was just as deadly, even leading his own criminal empire at one point. Maul's story is all about revenge, survival, and hate, which makes him pretty different from the more straightforward Sith apprentices like Vader. So, Darth Maul might not have had the same screen time as some others, but he left a lasting mark with his style and the raw power he wielded. Darth Zana. Darth Zana, however, is nothing like Darth Maul. She might not be as famous as Vader or Maul, but she's a fascinating Sith apprentice from the expanded Star Wars universe, especially in the Legends novels. Zana was the apprentice of Darth Bane, the guy who basically reinvented the Sith Order with his rule of two: one master, one apprentice. This rule was all about keeping the Sith strong and sneaky, and Zana was the perfect example of that new generation. What makes Zana interesting is how smart and cunning she was. She wasn't just about brute force. Instead, she was this master of dark side sorcery and illusions. She would make people see things that weren't there, or hide herself in the shadows. Like, she was a Sith spy and assassin rolled into one. Plus, she was really young when Darth Bane took her on as an apprentice, but she quickly learned the ropes and even challenged her master in that classic Sith way, because apprentices always aim to overthrow their masters eventually. In Legends lore, she actually killed Darth Bane and became the new Sith Lord, but in canon, she hasn't been reintroduced yet. Zana was all about patience and strategy, not just raw power. She knew how to play the long game, which made her super dangerous. Through her story, you get why the Sith value secrecy, manipulation, and cutthroat ambition. Count Dooku. Next, we have Count Dooku, also known as Darth Tyrannus if you want to get into the whole Sith vibe. Now, Dooku's story is pretty unique because he wasn't born into the dark side like some Sith apprentices. He actually started off as a Jedi Master, one of the most skilled and respected in the Order. The guy was calm, collected, and wise. But over time, he got super disillusioned with the Jedi and the Republic. He saw all the flaws and corruption and figured the old ways just weren't working anymore. So, enter Darth Sidious, the ultimate manipulator. Sidious saw Dooku's frustration and basically pulled him over to the dark side, turning him into a Sith apprentice. That's where Dooku got the name Darth Tyrannus. Unlike some Sith who rely on brute force and rage, Dooku brought this elegant, sophisticated vibe to the dark side. He was more like a nobleman turned assassin rather than a wild warrior. Dooku's also a master swordsman, known for his curved lightsaber that just looks super stylish. Plus, he's a serious political player. He led the Separatists during the Clone Wars, stirring up all that conflict that helped Sidious's plan to take over the galaxy come together. He was basically playing chess while everyone else was fighting checkers. You gotta admire that mix of brains and brawn. His calm and collected demeanor was kind of terrifying, because he was always thinking 5 moves ahead. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker learned that the hard way when they faced him. But here's the kicker. Even though he was Sidious's apprentice, Dooku had his own ambitions bubbling under the surface. Loyalty for a Sith is always a tricky thing since it's mostly about who's stronger. Dooku's fall shows how the dark side can twist a guy who was once a great Jedi into a cold, powerful weapon of destruction, and how even the smartest can fall for the dark side's lure. Darth Bane. Let's talk about Darth Bane because this guy is a total game changer for the Sith Order. If you've heard about the Rule of Two, that's all thanks to him. Before Bane, the Sith were basically a huge, chaotic mess, lots of them fighting each other for power, which honestly made them weak. So Darth Bane came in with a bold plan to fix that. His idea? There should only ever be 2 Sith at a time, one master to hold the power and one apprentice to crave it and eventually overthrow the master. This way, the Sith would stay strong and focused rather than self-destructing. Bane himself was this hardcore Sith warrior with a fierce attitude and a massive thirst for power. He wasn't someone to mess with. He lived during a time when the Sith were pretty much wiped out, and his whole mission was to bring the dark side back to its full glory. Plus, he was really brutal and clever. He took on the whole Sith Order to wipe out the weak and corrupt members and came out on top, establishing the Rule of Two for good. What's cool about Bane is he wasn't just a fighter, he was also a thinker. He believed the dark side was about strength through conflict, so only the strongest Sith should survive. That meant training his apprentice to be better and stronger so one day they could overthrow him. And that apprentice ended up being Darth Zana, the one who would eventually kill him and carry on his legacy. The Rule of Two stuck around for centuries and shaped how the Sith operated all the way through the movies and expanded lore. Without Bane, we probably wouldn't have had the secret Sith Master pulling strings storyline that made Darth Sidious such a legend. Darth Cognis. Darth Cognis, one of those Sith apprentices who doesn't get a ton of spotlight, but she's seriously fascinating, especially if you're into the deeper, darker corners of Star Wars lore. Cognis wasn't all about flashy lightsaber duels or stormtrooper showdowns. She was more of a dark side sorceress with powers that plunged into the mystical side of the Force. She lived during a time when the Sith were rebuilding after some major setbacks, so everything was super secretive, and Sith were working mostly from the shadows. Cognis fits perfectly into that picture. She was part of that quiet but deadly line of Sith who mastered the subtle arts, dark side manipulation, illusions, and mind control. So while other Sith might intimidate you with brute strength, Cognis could mess with your mind and the Force itself in ways that were downright eerie. What's really cool about her is that she had a deep connection to the Force, almost like she didn't just use it, but merged with it in a mystical way. Some stories say she had abilities that went beyond normal Sith powers, giving her unique insights and influence. Here's the kicker though. At some point, Darth Cognis just disappeared, and no one's sure what happened. Did she retire quietly? Was she taken out by some rival Sith? Or did she dive so deep into dark sorcery that she transformed into something else? That mystery makes her story even more intriguing. So yeah, Cognis might not have had massive battles recorded, but she's a great example of the Sith who operate in the shadows. Darth Plagueis. Next, we have Darth Plagueis, the Sith Lord who's almost legendary in the Star Wars universe, even though he's kinda mysterious. You might remember him because Darth Sidious talks about him in Revenge of the Sith. Plagueis was a master of the dark side arts, especially when it came to controlling life and death. What makes Plagueis stand out is his obsession with cheating death. The guy dedicated his life to learning how to manipulate the Force to stop living things from dying. He supposedly discovered how to prevent death and even create life using the Force. That's wild, right? Imagine the kind of power that is, being able to keep yourself or others alive forever. It's like the ultimate Sith goal of absolute control. Plagueis was also super smart and patient. He believed that with the right knowledge and control, the Sith could rule the galaxy forever. He trained Darth Sidious, who eventually betrayed and killed him. Even though Plagueis was powerful, he wasn't about flashy battles or open warfare. He worked more behind the scenes, pulling strings and researching forbidden secrets. His story is a bit tragic too because his lust for power blinded him, and he got taken down by his own student. What's fascinating is his whole influence on the saga. Sidious's plan to become Emperor and overthrow the Jedi was built on what he learned from Plagueis, especially the part about controlling life and death, techniques that shaped the rise of Anakin Skywalker and ultimately Vader. Darth Plagueis embodies the dark side's dark quest for immortality and ultimate power, blending science, magic, and manipulation in a way that's more frightening than just lightsaber fights. Darth Tenebrous. Darth Tenebrous, a Sith Lord who's not as well known as Vader or Sidious, but his story is pretty fascinating. Tenebrous pops up mainly in the expanded universe, particularly in the Darth Plagueis novel, where he's the Sith Master of Darth Plagueis. What's cool about Tenebrous is that he was a super calculated and scientific Sith. Unlike the usual image of Sith as wild and emotional fighters, Tenebrous was all about precision and using science to push the dark side further. He was obsessed with genetics and how to use the Force to manipulate life at its very core. He wanted to create the perfect Sith by enhancing physical and Force abilities through genetic engineering. He was incredibly patient too. Tenebrous believed in playing the long game. He waited for the right apprentice who would carry the Sith legacy forward, which turned out to be Darth Plagueis. Together, they were this powerhouse duo of Sith knowledge and power. Tenebrous wasn't focused on fancy lightsaber fights, though he could hold his own. Instead, he was deep into Sith science and dark rituals. His priorities were about bringing ultimate control over life and death, not just through raw power, but through knowledge and manipulation. This scientific approach laid the groundwork for Plagueis' obsession with cheating death and trying to create life itself. What makes Tenebrous intriguing is how he represents the Sith who combine brains with dark power. So yeah, Darth Tenebrous might not be front and center in the main saga, but his influence on the Sith legacy is massive, especially considering his role in training the Sith Lord who shaped the galaxy's fate, Darth Plagueis. Darth Ramage. Darth Ramage, this is a Sith apprentice who's kinda low-key, but honestly super interesting if you know your Star Wars lore. Ramage isn't one of those flashy Sith Lords who go around dueling Jedi with crazy lightsabers. Nah, he's more the sneaky, deadly type. He's from the expanded universe, representing that darker, secretive side of the Sith that thrives on stealth and smart strategy rather than brute force. Ramage was basically the Sith's ultimate assassin. His whole deal was taking out threats quietly and efficiently. Jedi, enemies, whoever got in the Sith's way. No flashy moves or big fights, just precise, planned strikes from the shadows. If you didn't even see it coming, that was the point. But here's the thing that makes Ramage stand out. He wasn't just there to swing a lightsaber. He played a big role in the Sith's long-term survival plan. The Jedi were always hunting the Sith, so Ramage's job was to make sure the Sith stayed alive and hidden by eliminating threats without drawing attention. Like a secret weapon, he helped the Sith grow their dark power while keeping under the radar. He didn't want fame or glory, or even to be known as a great warrior. Instead, he found his power in silence and precision. That shadowy, calculated style made him the perfect Sith apprentice for those who work best behind the scenes. So yeah, Darth Ramage might not be the Sith you hear about in movies or loud stories, but his quiet, deadly work was just as important in keeping the Sith Order alive. Darth Sidious. Now the infamous Darth Sidious. You might know him better as Emperor Palpatine, the ultimate puppet master of the Star Wars saga. To most folks in the galaxy, he's just a smooth-talking politician from Naboo who seems harmless enough, but behind that friendly senator smile, total mastermind Sith Lord playing the long game. His rise to power wasn't by cutting enemies down one by one. It was about sneaking into the right spots, stirring trouble quietly, and slowly bending the whole galaxy to his will. He engineered the Clone Wars just to weaken the Jedi and the Republic, and he did it all while pretending to be their biggest ally. And the guy's got this insane ego, like he literally believes he's unstoppable. Remember when he tells Darth Vader, "Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen"? That line is pure Sidious, all about his grand plans and how nothing can mess them up. But here's the thing, he's not just smart, he's also heartless. The guy truly doesn't care who he crushes on his way up. Friends, allies, even apprentices. Betrayal is just part of the game for him. He was also a master at twisting Anakin Skywalker's mind. Sidious didn't just flip him to the dark side, he played on all of Anakin's fears and doubts, promising him power over life and death, things Anakin desperately wanted. That was Sidious's biggest win, turning the galaxy's hero into Darth Vader, his ultimate weapon. Even when things seem like they were over, Sidious doesn't just quit. he pops back up with these crazy plans for the future, proving he's one of those villains who never really dies.